Hello everybody. Today we find ourselves north of Fitchville, Ohio at a very tragic location. Right behind me stood the Golden Age Nursing Home. And on November 23rd, 1963 at 4:45 a.m., a tragic fire broke out, killing 63 of 84 patients. I'm going to bring you to the location which we're in right now, and I'm going to bring you to where those patients are buried. Stay tuned. So as you can see right here, this is Route 250. And just down this side street here, on the edge of some farmland, is where the nursing home once stood. Now, this story has a lot of components. Obviously, it was overshadowed by the assassination of JFK, which happened the day before, not even 24 hours to this event. But also, it was the deadliest fire as far as loss of life since 1958 in Chicago. It was the Our Lady of Angels School, which killed 92 of the 95 victims inside. This was also the second event within a week that happened in that year involving elderly perishing in fires. At the Surfside Hotel in Atlantic City, 25 were killed on November 18th. So just a little bit more information about the building. The Golden Age Nursing Home was a rambling L-shaped 186 feet by 65 feet, one-story mixed construction structure that had been expanded 3 times since its erection in 1949 as a factory for sewing automobile fabrics. Interior alterations were made in 1953 to convert it into a nursing home, and the lobby of similar construction was added in 1955. So a little background to this also. So in 1962, patients that were not considered mentally ill were being removed from the Cleveland State Hospital to this location. At the morning of the fire, there was a total of 87 patients. 32 were considered mentally ill, and they were being cared for by a staff of 3 nurses. So this would have been right around breakfast time, obviously, as I said, 4:45 in the morning. Employees plugged in a steam table, an electric steam table, and a coffee maker into the outlets. I guess it was a 220-volt outlet, and they heard crackling and popping shortly later. The circuits finally gave out and blew, igniting everything in the attic, all the lines. It was almost instantaneous. Very quickly after, passerbys in trucks and vehicles on their own on 250 here, Route 250, started seeing the flames coming down this road, and they tried to stop to see what they could do to help. At the time of the fire, the building had plywood wainscoting in the corridor and lobby. Some of the ceiling was fire resistive and some wasn't. The building had passed an inspection the previous March. Official reports say that both present and former owners permitted alterations of the electrical circuits contrary to requirements of the National Electrical Code, and that inspection and approval of alterations were neither sought nor obtained. Sworn testimony of the employees indicated repeated warnings in the form of burnt-out switches, a smoking fuse box, and blown fuses, and that electrical installations were inadequate and improperly wired. The building had neither automatic sprinklers nor a fire detection system, and there was no local manual alarm. At one time, there had been a small reservoir excavated in the front of the building for firefighting use, but this had been filled in because it presented a hazard to patients. The only means of firefighting were 3 portable extinguishers, and there was no emergency evacuation plan. So this fire broke out so fast that they couldn't even get a phone call out to the fire department because the wires had been burnt through. And Fitchville, where we are right now, or a mile north of, didn't even have their own fire department. One of the motorists was actually able to get down to a local farmhouse where he was able to phone the New London Fire Department and actually make somebody aware of what was going on. Some passing by motorists had fire extinguishers in their vehicle and did what they could to try to put out the fire. Others tried to rescue as many victims as possible. But unfortunately, the fire was just so strong and had taken off so fast that it didn't help. Now, 21 people were able to be evacuated before the fire took completely over. There was a lot of factors that played into that. The building construction, was built with a lot of flammable objects, number one. Number two, there was 35-mile-an-hour winds going on that night, which just fed those flames. It was just a recipe for disaster. The New London Fire Department received the alarm about 5 a.m. and under the command of Chief Albert Waters were on scene at 5:10 a.m. after a 7.6-mile run and some 25 minutes after the fire apparently started. Chief Waters stated that on his arrival, the roof and ceiling areas were entirely in flames, and the entry into the building was impossible at any point. When the firefighters responded to the scene, the fire was burning so hot that the tar on the roof began to boil and fall onto the ground near rescuers. Waters radioed for more help, particularly tankers. The Greenwich Fire Department was the first to arrive to the mutual aid request, and under Chief Robert Siddell, attacked the fire from the north side with 2 hose lines. North Fairfield arrived soon after with a tanker which supplied the Greenwich lines and refilled from a pond in Fitchville. Plymouth was the last of the responding departments and reported in with a tanker that hauled water from New London. However, the combination of delayed alarms and the lack of water was too great of a handicap for the firefighters to overcome, and the building burned to the ground. So those 21 patients and 3 of the nurses survived. The rest who perished were mentally ill, and they just were not able to get themselves out for various reasons. A lot of them were restrained to their beds. A lot of them were stuck because their wheelchairs couldn't fit through the doors that were not up to code for wheelchairs and handicapped accessible exits. It was absolutely just heartbreaking to think about. So more than 16 ambulances were utilized, bringing patients to the Norwalk High School. Meanwhile, simultaneously, they were setting up a makeshift morgue in the Fitchville School auditorium. In addition to the survivors, staff members and firefighters were treated for burns, severe burns, and smoke inhalation at the local hospital as well. Now, if it wasn't already tragic enough, and I'm going to warn you, when I was reading this, it just gave me an ill feeling. Knowing people that have gone through, the illnesses that come with old age, the confusion and things like that, it's devastating. It really tugged on my heartstrings. The building owner, Robert Pollock, said in an interview on official record that if these patients had someone to guide them, if they didn't panic, they could have saved a lot more. They could have gotten out. Unfortunately, a lot of these confused patients in their elderly state didn't know what to do. They panicked, and instead of trying to escape through a door, they just went back to their beds. These victims, firefighters reported they found them just still restrained to their beds. Some of them had hand restraints. I don't know why they would have had hand restraints other than, obviously some being mentally ill. They might have been a danger to themselves, but, obviously there wasn't a protocol for this kind of thing, and they were unfortunately trapped. And I mentioned before, obviously, the doors were not made in a specific way. So, certain wheelchairs couldn't get outdoors, and people piled up behind the wheelchair, and in the confusion, they couldn't get out. They didn't know to go around the wheelchair or try to help them out. It was absolute chaos. And as I said, in some of their older states and their mental state, they just didn't have the wherewithal to think clearly. All records and files were destroyed in the roaring flames, and the smoke that burst open the cabinets wrecked all the medical and surgical equipment, melted bedstands, and left little but smoldering ruins in the facility. Their loss complicated the attempts of police and funeral directors to name and number the dead. 35 of the facility's 36 mentally disabled residents died during the blaze, and many were so burned that identification was done based on the registration number of the bed that they were found in. Before any bodies were removed in the aftermath, each were numbered and the location that they were found in was recorded on a chart. Then, from the memory of the attendants and the manager, they identified the bodies due to the location they were discovered. During the recovery of the remains, firefighters were told to spray the occupied metal beds holding the remains lightly so that they would remain not damaged. At least one set of remains was identified to have restraints still fastened to her arms. So many of the deceased were buried. There was a handful of 21, later 22, of individuals that either were not claimed or their families were not around. People that reached out and said, or they didn't have financial means to bury these individuals. And so they are buried in a mass grave at a local cemetery, which we're going to go to right now. But I know from the research that I've done, the city basically covered that. They covered the expense of the funeral, the ceremony, the vaults, the coffins, everything, the headstone. Local funeral directors volunteered their time, volunteered their efforts. Just absolutely crazy. I say it every time, but just coming to locations like this, just devastating. And they put this plaque here on the side of the road, marking the location and remembering the names of those who have passed. So the sign says Golden Age Nursing Home Fire. Located 1 mile north of Fitchville, the Golden Age Nursing Home caught fire and burned to the ground at 4:45 a.m. on November 23rd, 1963, killing 63 of 84 patients. Fire departments from New London, Greenwich, North Fairfield, and Plymouth responded. Ignited by the arcing of overloaded wiring, the incident called for action to require sprinklers, automatic fire detection systems, and electrical wiring compliance to building codes at all nursing homes. The worst tragedy of its kind in the nation, the incident was overshadowed by the assassination of President John F. Kennedy and was not widely reported. 21 unclaimed bodies were interred in the 60-foot grave in Woodlawn Cemetery in Norwalk. Those killed in the fire are listed on the reverse. And then as you can see on the back side of this, it says all the names. Absolutely incredible. Looks like at one point they had a little covering over this picnic table that one could enjoy and sit down and remember the tragic events and maybe have a little memorial service or something, but it looks like that's long gone. I'm gonna go ahead and list all the names at the end of the video, just as a remembrance and memorial for these individuals. So if you can't read it all right now and don't want to pause it, you'll see them all later. Now there's also an excellent documentary on YouTube. It's available. It's called Fireland. I'm going to warn you, it's incredibly graphic, and incredibly hard to watch. I don't think it was something that was ever aired on TV. So it was something that was, you know, they didn't censor anything. And basically it's just a collection of stories of the individuals that were there or who had witnessed it. As I said, it's incredibly graphic and hard to listen to. I listened to it on the way here. It's filled with a lot of pictures and, you know, things like that, but the stories are just heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. So I will link it in the description if you guys want to learn more or hear those stories. It'll be there available for you. Yeah. But we are going to head over to that cemetery right now and pay our respects. So I am standing here at the memorial and headstone for those 21 victims that were either not claimed or their families couldn't afford to have a proper burial. We are in the Woodlawn Cemetery. It's very quiet and beautiful. A lot of old headstones in here, which is just crazy, but a lot of newer ones too. And I'm back almost as far back as you can possibly be in this cemetery. I know it happened in 1963, so it wasn't like it was something that would be up in the front with like the early 1800s stuff, but I'm surprised it's kind of back here where all the newer graves are. But maybe they just wanted a plot that was kind of on its own in the back, and maybe it was obviously way more on its own than it is now back in 1963, but there's open spaces you can see on both sides. This side as well as this side. And the stone monument stands right in the middle. And from what I've read, all of the burials were just laid out here in this plot, side by side. It is a beautiful little quiet corner though. They did a fantastic job. So right here on this plaque are 21 of the, I guess we'll say unclaimed, for lack of a better term, victims. There was one more person buried on that day from the disaster, and that was a man named John Rook. He was a World War I veteran, making him the 22nd person buried on that day that were part of the unclaimed victims. It's so bizarre when you come to a place like this. I mean, coming from the location of the tragedy and then coming to a place where they're immortalized forever in their final resting place, it really brings it home. You know, it really solidifies the devastation that we're talking about here. I don't know what it is about the elderly or babies. It makes it a lot harder. I mean, not that everything isn't difficult. A lot of these topics we cover is difficult, but God, man. And the beautiful wood line and just everything behind me, it's a quiet but peaceful, serene place. Just as good as any, I think. I think to avoid mispronouncing any names, I'll just stick with what I originally said, and I'll put everybody's name as a memorial at the end. But I will show you some up-close shots here and let you read them yourself. Due to the large number of lives lost, Ohio Governor James A. Rhodes directed that the investigation be more intensive than usual, and for it to be headed by State Fire Marshal Fred Rice. The investigation continued through December 30th, 1963, and required more than 3,300 man-hours. 100 people were questioned, including 39 firefighters and police officers. The investigation concluded that the existence of a documented evacuation plan and familiarity with the plan by the aides on duty would have saved more lives. Examination of wiring at the service and main fuse box disclosed evidence of shorting or of an overload, and that the 220-volt line experienced extensive electrical arcing throughout the building, particularly in the junction boxes. Copper and brass contacts in the 220-volt boxes were melted and fused together, and individual conductors had disintegrated. Damage to the facility was estimated at $100,000, and in January, the Huron County Grand Jury conducted its own 5-day investigation of the fire and reported that it had found no violation of Ohio criminal law. However, the report criticized the state for valueless inspections of the nursing home. The state subsequently ordered beefed-up inspections of wiring in nursing homes. State lawmakers later established regulations that required automatic sprinklers, adequate fire exits, and extinguishers, while also giving the state more authority over nursing homes in Ohio. And it looks like some people, families, friends, left some stuff on here for them. So it's really good to know that people are still visiting, that people are still taking the time to remember and celebrate these individuals' lives. I wish I could find the grave of John Rook. I couldn't find it on Find a Grave, which is strange. I don't think that he's buried in an unmarked grave, but maybe he's just not listed, which is possible. I looked around here close to the memorial and I didn't see any with his name on it. I'll keep looking. But if you're trying to find this memorial, as I said, come straight to the back far right corner of the cemetery against the wood line. You'll see homes on the other side of the wood line, and it's going to be right there. If you are here, though, take some time to explore the cemetery because it is incredible. If you're into that kind of thing, which I guess you might be since you're watching my videos, it's insane. Some of the older graves and the dates and just the detail on them is incredible. One of the coolest cemeteries I've been in a very, very long time. So I want to thank you guys for watching another episode of Oddity Acres, this time telling the story and remembering those lost in the 1963 tragic fire of the Golden Age Nursing Home in Fitchville, Ohio. I bring you guys to these locations and I tell you these stories not only to remember history, but to remember those who are lost. And remember that life is precious. And sometimes you have to come to a place like this to really realize that. stay tuned because there's a lot more in store. If you guys like these kinds of stories, if you guys like learning about history, sometimes a little bit darker side of history, the more sad and tragic events of history, I cover a lot of those on this channel. So if you can consider liking and subscribing, that would mean a lot to me. Lets me know that you guys are enjoying it and that I'm doing something right. In the meantime, thank you guys again. As I said, I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I appreciate the 3,000 subscribers we just hit, which is insane. I remember when we hit 100 subscribers and I was elated. So it's just crazy how far we've come. So thank you guys all for tuning in. Thank you for all the wonderful comments and all of the interactions that I've had with each and every one of you. It means a lot to me. And I'm excited to continue this journey. So stay tuned for more. As always, stay scared. Happy Halloween.